Hello guys, welcome back to the Art of War. Today we are again doing a reaction on our part 2 about Napoleon's Marshals part 2. I'm talking very quickly because we need to hurry up. We didn't get to half of the video and yeah, we need to hurry up. I ended the previous video reading this sentence for you, this quote from Napoleon, and I will do it again to begin this video. Before we we react to the video, subscribe, like, comment your suggestions, and check the links in the description. Share the video with your friends, and let's jump right in. A truly brave man, this is Napoleon about Marshal Lefebvre. A truly brave man who does not concern himself with the maneuvers on his left and right, but thinks only of fighting well and is not afraid to die. As I told you, in the previous part we have seen, on the previous part about Napoleon's Marshal Part 2, we have seen Augereau, Bernadotte, yeah, only those. And until now, I told my provisions. It was in this episode. It would be Lefebvre, it would be MacDonald, it would be Mortier, and maybe Victor. So yeah, those were my provisions. Until now, no one was satisfied. But yeah, I mean Lefebvre was. Yeah, but we'll see how that will go. And very quickly, guys. Uh, okay, it's that now. Yeah, let's just continue.
Francois Lefebvre was a sergeant with 16 years' service in the elite Garde Française when the French Revolution broke out. When the Guard was disbanded, he became an officer in the Paris National Guard and received the first of many wounds protecting the royal family from an angry mob.
Oh, he was protecting the royal family. He was a royalist, okay?
Every inch the soldier, the Revolutionary Wars brought Lefebvre opportunity for active command and rapid promotion. In just 2 years he rose from captain to general, establishing a reputation as a formidable divisional commander, a good tactician, brave, energetic, and attentive to the needs of his men. His chief of staff, the future Marshal Soult, acknowledged that he learned much from Lefebvre's example.
Oh, he learned most? Okay, Soult learned a lot from Lefebvre. It's a shame that Soult is just such a shitty marshal.
In 1799, Lefebvre commanded the Paris military district. Not much impressed by politicians, when Napoleon asked him to support a coup, he was all for it, declaring, "Yes, let's throw the lawyers into the river."
Oh, that's right. And he was saying this because Napoleon overthrew the Directory, and the Directory was mostly composed of the bourgeois class, the rich class of France, not the aristocrats, but the bourgeois. Am I saying well? Yeah, I think I am. The burghers, but anyway, yeah, there were traders, lawyers, and doctors mainly at this time. So yeah, that's why he said let's throw the lawyers into the river. And because he was not impressed with the Directory, most of France did not like the Directory. That's why Napoleon managed to do the coup, and because he had control of the army.
In 1804, Napoleon made Lefebvre an honorary marshal. Honorary because Napoleon assumed Lefebvre would prefer a quiet life in the Senate.
Yeah, there were lots of honorary marshals, like normally the very old, which had already like expired that day, their date of combat. But Lefebvre was not one of them. Lefebvre was not one of them.
After a decade's active service with the scars to prove it. But he'd underestimated Lefebvre, who pleaded for a frontline role. So the Emperor gave him command of the Imperial Guard Infantry for the Jena campaign.
I remember this.
The next year, Lefebvre commanded the siege of Danzig, inspiring the troops of 10th Corps by leading one counterattack in person. After the successful conclusion of the siege, Napoleon awarded Lefebvre the title Duke of Danzig. Lefebvre's record as a corps commander was mixed. In Spain, he exasperated Napoleon by twice ignoring orders. But in 1809, when Archduke Charles of Austria launched a sudden attack on Bavaria, Lefebvre's Bavarian 7th Corps was crucial in slowing the enemy advance, until Napoleon arrived to take charge. He was then given the difficult task of suppressing a popular revolt in the Tyrol, led by Andreas Hofer, which he achieved
Andreas Hofer.
He was then given the difficult task of suppressing a popular revolt in the Tyrol, led by Andreas Hofer, which he achieved despite some early setbacks. For the invasion of Russia, Lefebvre commanded the infantry of the Old Guard. During the retreat from Moscow, the 57-year-old Marshal insisted on marching on foot at the head of the guard all the way. At the end of the retreat, he was devastated to learn that his son, a 27-year-old general, was among nearly 100,000 men who had not survived the march.
Oh, his son died. His son died. I don't know. How does his son die when he's 27 and like, I mean, he must have, like, he had importance in the army, so his son had a beneficial treatment, and he does not die when he's marching all the way on foot. I don't know.
He had been Lefebvre's last surviving child.
His last surviving child.
Of 14.
Of 14? Come on. God, what did you do to this guy? 14 children and none survived.
After a year recovering from exhaustion and grief, Lefebvre returned to lead the Old Guard one last time in the defense of France, and was in heavy fighting at Montmiral and Montereau. But in April 1814, he was one of the marshals who confronted Napoleon with the reality of his position and forced him to abdicate. Lefebvre and his wife, an ex-washerwoman turned duchess,
Washerwoman to duchess, and very fat woman also. Madame
were famous for their lack of airs and graces, for honest, blunt speech, and for always helping out old comrades. When a friend commented on Lefebvre's wealth and titles, the marshal invited him into the courtyard. "I'll have 10 shots at you with a musket at 30 paces, he told him. A friend commented on Lefebvre's wealth and titles. The marshal invited him into the courtyard. "I'll have 10 shots at you with a musket at 30 paces, he told him. If I miss, the whole estate is yours." When the friend declined, Lefebvre added, "I had 1,000 bullets fired at me from closer before I got all this." Lefebvre was too exhausted to take an active role in the Waterloo campaign, though he accepted a role as a senator under Napoleon, which led to a brief period in disgrace when the Bourbons returned. His rank and honours were restored to him a year before his death in 1820.
Also, Mortier. Oh. I nailed 2. Until now, I nailed 2. Boom. Let's continue.
Marshal Mortier.
Ooh, that's a. Yeah, I knew that who for me is the best martial of. But in general, falling. I think my preferred ranking would be Davu, Lane, maybe Bastier, but maybe Lane, Olan, Davu, and hmm, maybe Ney or or Murat or Bernadotte. But
Edouard Mortier was from a prosperous middle-class background in northern France. When the French Revolution began in 1789, he volunteered.
he was killed in assassination attempt. What? This guy is radical. Oh, he's probably one of those marshals who were killed by royalists when Napoleon fell.
Volunteered for the National Guard, a new middle-class militia charged with preserving order and defending against counter-revolution. When war broke out with France's neighbours, Mortier's unit was sent to the front. Standing 6'4", Mortier was conspicuous for his height and
6'4", the guy is huge.
bravery, being wounded twice and winning praise from his commander, the future Marshal Lefebvre. In
The commander was Marshal Lefebvre, okay. But according to epic history, Lefebvre was better than Mortier. No, Mortier was better than Lefebvre. The apprentice beats the master.
99, Mortier fought under General Massena's command at the Second Battle of Zurich, helping to defeat the Russians and winning promotion to the rank of General of Division.
Yeah, Russians in Italy. Epic. I'm just telling you, epic. Russians in Switzerland, Russians in Italy, Russians in the Alps. Everything about those three names are epic.
Mortier then spent 3 years commanding the Paris military district. His efficiency impressed the new first consul, Napoleon Bonaparte, who chose him for an important mission in 1803, the occupation of Hanover, a German state belonging to the Hanoverian kings of Britain, with whom France was, once more, at war. Mortier carried out this assignment with tact and diplomacy, ensuring the occupation was unopposed. This delighted Napoleon, who rewarded him a year later with the rank of marshal. Following Napoleon's victory over the Austrians at Ulm in 1805, Mortier and his new 8th Corps led the pursuit of the retreating Russians, but became encircled by a much larger force at Durenstein. Mortier fought his way out of the trap with a nighttime bayonet charge, a remarkable escape, but his corps suffered heavy losses. Mortier and 8th Corps were in a supporting role for the Jena campaign of 1806. But the next year at Friedland, his corps played an important role holding Napoleon's left wing, as the Emperor inflicted a devastating defeat on the Russians. Mortier was well liked by all, and almost uniquely did not engage in feuds and rivalries with the other marshals. Oudinot was a particular friend. In East Prussia, their party trick was to snuff out the candles with pistol shots.
Really? I might one day try that when I get my hands on a Napoleonic era pistol.
And almost uniquely did not engage in feuds and rivalries with the other marshals. Oudinot was a particular friend. In East Prussia, their party trick was to snuff out the candles with pistol shots. They always paid generous compensation for damage caused.
Always pay generous compensation for damage caused.
In 1808, Mortier joined Napoleon for the invasion of Spain and commanded 5th Corps at the brutal siege of Zaragoza. He then helped win a series of victories over Spanish forces, including the crushing victory at Ocaña, operating alongside another friend, Marshal Soult. Mortier was recalled to France to organize and train the Young Guard, a new junior unit of the Imperial Guard, made up of the best conscripts from each year's intake. Mortier led the Young Guard in Russia in 1812, but was powerless to prevent the Corps' destruction on that campaign. First through exhaustion and disease on the march to Moscow, then on the retreat, where his surviving troops were effectively sacrificed to hold open the road at Krasny.
I remember. In Krasny, the Young Guard was virtually uh, it was not decimated, because when you are decimated, you stay with a tenth of your force, and they didn't. They were annihilated.
And allow the army's escape. Mortier continued to command the Young Guard during Napoleon's campaigns in Germany and France, and was never far from the action. At Lutzen, he was trapped under his wounded horse, was in heavy fighting at Leipzig, and had his hat shot through outside Paris.
Headshot through outside Paris. Oh my god, this guy is radical. Let's just hear again of his surviving techniques.
Mortier continued to command the Young Guard during Napoleon's campaigns in Germany and France, and was never far from the action. At Lutzen, he was trapped under his wounded horse, was in heavy fighting at Leipzig, and had his hat shot through outside Paris. In 1814, the final defence of the French capital fell to troops under Mortier and Marmont, with support from Marshal Moncey's National Guard. Mortier told his men, "We have not enough troops to resist their large armies for long, but today, more than ever before, we are fighting for our honour." When Napoleon returned from exile in 1815, he wanted Mortier to resume his customary role at the head of the Young Guard, but a severe attack of sciatica prevented him joining the Emperor at Waterloo.
Sciatica. I'll have to search that.
Napoleon never regarded Mortier as suitable for major independent command, but his loyalty and conduct were always beyond reproach. He went on to serve the restored monarchy as ambassador to Russia and briefly Minister for War. In 1835, he was riding beside King Louis-Philippe in a public parade when an assassin
he was killed with King Louis-Philippe. Really?
And briefly Minister for War.
So he wasn't assassinated by the royalists, he was assassinated by Republicans.
In 1835, he was riding beside King Louis-Philippe in a public parade when an assassin opened fire with a homemade multi-barreled gun. The king received a minor wound, but Marshal Mortier and 17 others were killed.
How does an assassin kill 17 guys?
A homemade multi-barreled gun. The king received a minor wound, but Marshal Mortier and 17 others were killed. 14. Marshal Marmont.
When I did the provision in the last episode, I was thinking about Marmont, but because I thought that, we don't have a lot of space to a lot of marshals, and I thought that MacDonald and Victor would be first, and Marmont. That's just why Marmont was I debated about MacDonald and Marmont, but I chose that MacDonald would be first and Marmont. But I guess Marmont lost he got a devastated defeat in Salamanca at the hands of Wellington, and he also. Um, against the orders of Napoleon, surrendered this corps, which was the last hope of Napoleon to win the war in 1814. So yeah, I guess he had a lot of setbacks too, but he was nonetheless a good marshal. Oh, see, who might call my son? Oh, the thing about Marmont, if you didn't know, in 1813, some of the recruits were so inexperienced that in the middle of battle, he was teaching them how to fire muskets. Unbelievable. But yeah, Napoleon, you were betrayed by Marmont. I didn't know you called him son. My child, my creation. Even if he was I was betrayed by Marmont, whom I could call my son, my child, my creation. Vanity was his end.
Marmont, like Napoleon, was a trained artillery officer and met the future emperor for the first time at the siege of Toulon.
Where Napoleon was also an artillery officer.
Where Napoleon made his name. They formed a friendship, and when Napoleon was given command of the French army in Italy, he took Major Marmont with him as an aide-de-camp. Marmont distinguished himself at several of Napoleon's early victories in Italy.
So other person that might get into this episode, although I think it deserves better, is Suchet because of his brilliant campaign in southern Spain. So yeah, I think Suchet should be a bit higher ranked, but if he's on 13, he's also a very good rank. So.
And was commanding his own artillery regiment by the age of 23. As part of Napoleon's inner circle, Marmont accompanied him on his expedition to Egypt in 1798, fighting in the battles of Alexandria and the Pyramids. Naturally, he backed Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire, as Napoleon overthrew the Directory and made himself first consul of France. 6 months later, Napoleon led an army over the Alps into Italy. It was his artillery commander, General Marmont, who figured out how to get the cannon through the mountain passes using man-hauled sledges. At the ensuing Battle of Marengo, Marmont's skilled handling of the artillery helped Napoleon to win a decisive victory over the Second Coalition.
He was almost losing. He lost at Marengo, but then he got back with reinforcements, and because of the valiant General Dessau, which we talked about in the first episode, he won.
2 years later, Marmont was made Inspector General of Artillery, working with Napoleon to implement reforms that improved firepower, mobility and supply. Marmont was bitterly disappointed not to be among the first marshals created in 1804. But he was still only 29, and Napoleon assured him that time was on his side. He was further frustrated in 1805, when his corps was sent to guard the army's strategic southern flank.
Oh, instead of being in Austerlitz. I mean, at least he was against Archduke Charles, a great enemy of Napoleon.
So missed the great victory at Austerlitz. The spoils of that war included Dalmatia, which Marmont was sent to govern in 1806. Though he
provinces, because later it will be a little bit more extended, have a little bit more territory.
He lived in extravagant luxury. His reforms and infrastructure projects were so effective that even the Emperor of Austria later admitted, "It's a great pity that Marmont was not in Dalmatia 2 or 3 years longer." When war broke out with Austria again in 1809, Marmont marched north with 11th Corps to join Napoleon near Vienna. But at the Great Battle of Wagram, his troops remained in reserve, while the other corps were engaged in ferocious fighting. At last, an opportunity to prove himself came, as Napoleon ordered him to pursue the retreating Austrians. But reckless overenthusiasm nearly led to disaster at Znaim. A week later, Napoleon created 3 new marshals: MacDonald,
Oudinot, and Marmont. Yeah, Oudinot might be in this. Oh, I don't think Oudinot will be in this episode. I really don't think. I don't think anyone else will be in this episode. So I felt about MacDonald, and I'm always forgetting the other one. Who cares?
Oudinot and Marmont. MacDonald for France, it was said. Oudinot for the army, Marmont for friendship. Napoleon then rather undermined the moment by telling Marmont, "Between ourselves, you've not yet done enough to justify my choice." His big Napoleon then rather undermined the moment by telling Marmont, "Between ourselves, you've not yet done enough to justify my choice." His big chance came in 1811.
And he disappointed Napoleon. He lost at Salamanca,
when he was sent to Spain to replace Marshal Massena. But after a promising start, and some bold manoeuvring against the British on the Douro River, he stumbled into
It's not Douro River, it's Dour.
disaster at Salamanca.
I told you. Where he was mortally wounded, but he didn't die, but he was mortally wounded.
Marmont himself was an early casualty of the battle, badly wounded by a shell burst and carried from the field, as Wellington routed his army. After convalescing in France, Marmont was back with the Grande Armée in 1813, as Napoleon battled to save his empire. He commanded 6th Corps throughout the campaign in Germany, fighting at Lützen, Bautzen and Dresden. At Leipzig he held the northern sector with skill and determination, making Blücher's Prussians pay a high price for the village of Möcker. Marmont played an important role in Napoleon's 1814 defence of France, shadowing Blücher's movements along the Marne River and guarding the road to Paris. But by now he was showing signs of exhaustion and disillusion. At the Battle of Laon, he allowed his corps to be surprised by the enemy, with heavy loss. Napoleon's stinging criticism may have been the moment that ended Marmont's loyalty. He was the senior marshal in Paris when the Allies attacked on the 30th of March. After a day's fighting and facing inevitable defeat, he negotiated the city's surrender. 5 days later, with Napoleon at Fontainebleau still planning to march on Paris, Marmont marched his corps over to the Allied lines and surrendered. Napoleon was shocked at this betrayal by one of his oldest comrades. He'd already been persuaded that he must try to abdicate in favor of his 3-year-old son. Now he accepted that he must abdicate without conditions. Whether Marmont acted to save lives, out of self-interest or spite, or a combination of all three, remains.
Yeah, Napoleon might have got his 3-year-old son on the throne if it wasn't for Marmont.
The subject of heated debate. We do. Whether Marmont acted to save lives, out of self-interest or spite, or a combination of all three, remains the subject of heated debate. We do know that he was well rewarded by the restored Bourbon king.
Of course.
And never forgiven by Bonaparte loyalists. As military commander of Paris in 1830, Marmont could not prevent the next revolution and had to flee France. He spent the rest of his life in exile, becoming tutor while he was in Vienna to Napoleon.
He was tutor of Napoleon's son, the Duke of Reichstadt, which died. Yeah, I know, I knew that. I actually knew that. I even knew the exact age. At 21, he died from tuberculosis. He was very feeble since a child. Oops.
And son, the Duke of Reichstadt. He was the last of Napoleon's marshals to die in Venice in
The last of Napoleon's marshals, really?
1852. Bernadotte, Augereau, Lefebvre, Mortier, Marmont. 13 down, 13 to go. Join us for part 3 when we'll continue the countdown, coming soon. Thanks again to our video sponsor, Displate. And don't forget you can check out the Epic History TV collection using the link in the video description.
So guys, like, subscribe, comment, and tell me in the comments your suggestions, and who do you think it will be the first marshal? It will be Murat, Lannes, Davout? Who do you think it's going to be? Tell me in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Until then, bye for now. Peace.